If Elon Musk were a child today, sitting quietly in a classroom somewhere in the United States, would he be seen as gifted or would he be labeled? Because in 2024, more than 11% of children in the United States were diagnosed with ADHD. This according to data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. But here's the question nobody really asks. What if some of these minds aren't broken? What if they simply aren't made for this environment? Because when you look at Elon Musk's mind, you don't just see intelligence. You see intensity, relentless focus, extreme productivity, a brain that doesn't slow down, even when it should. And in today's world, that kind of mind doesn't always fit. Teachers seek attention, systems reward obedience, and anything outside the norm is often redirected or diagnosed. But Elon Musk himself revealed something in recent years. In 2021, during his appearance on Saturday Night Live, he openly declared, "I have Asperger's, not ADHD." But something deeply connected to how the brain processes focus, social interaction, and stimulation. And that's where things start to become confusing. Because today, the line between neurological difference and environmental overload is becoming harder to see. So the real question isn't, does Elon Musk have ADHD? It's this: what does his mind reveal about the world we live in today? Because maybe the problem isn't attention. Maybe it's what's competing for it. Before the companies, before the headlines, before the world knew the name Elon Musk, there was a child sitting alone, not distracted, not inattentive, but elsewhere. Elon Musk described his childhood as intensely introspective, long hours reading, obsession with ideas, total loss of the sense of time. At 10 years old, he had already taught himself to program computers. At 12, he created and sold a video game, not because he was told to, but because his mind wouldn't let go of the idea. And this is where something important begins to emerge, because what seems like distraction can sometimes be the opposite. It can be hyperfocus, a state where attention doesn't wander, it locks in so deeply that the outside world disappears. Today, this characteristic is often associated with both ADHD and autism spectrum disorders. But here's the catch. In a modern classroom, hyperfocus doesn't always look like a gift, because the system wasn't designed for intensity. It was designed for rhythm, schedules, transitions, instructions, even pace. And when a child doesn't follow that rhythm, they stand out. In fact, according to a 2023 report from the National Institute of Mental Health, children with high cognitive intensity often exhibit deep focus on specific interests, difficulty switching attention, reduced engagement in structured group tasks, which can easily be interpreted as a problem. But what if it isn't? What if a mind like Elon Musk's never lacked attention, but simply refused to divide it? Because when a mind is completely absorbed, it doesn't easily shift focus. It resists interruption. It rejects fragmentation. And in today's world, that resistance might seem dysfunctional. But perhaps it's something more. Now, imagine that same type of mind, intense, focused, resistant to interruptions, and place it in today's world. Not in the 1980s, not in a quiet room with books, but in 2026. A world where attention is no longer protected. It is targeted. Every screen, every app, every notification is designed to compete for one thing: your attention. According to a 2024 Deloitte study, the average American checks their cell phone more than 140 times a day. That's not distraction. That's conditioning. And it doesn't stop there. A 2025 Data Reporter report showed that the average adult in the United States spends more than 7 hours a day consuming digital media. Teenagers, even more. Which means that something subtle but powerful is happening. Attention is no longer sustained. It is fragmented, distracted, in multiple directions at the same time. Now think of a child, a developing brain, still learning to regulate focus, still learning to filter out noise, placed in an environment where silence is rare and stimulation is constant. And when that child has difficulty concentrating, we ask, what's wrong with their attention? But rarely do we ask, what's happening around them? Because when the environment changes, behavior follows suit. In fact, a study published in 2023 by the American Psychological Association highlighted a direct correlation between greater screen exposure, reduced sustained attention, and higher levels of mental fatigue. Not as a disorder, but as a response. So now, the question becomes more troubling. If a mind like Elon Musk's already operates at high intensity, what happens when that same intensity is placed in a world that never stops demanding from it? Because maybe what we call ADHD isn't always a deficit. Maybe it's a reaction. Now, imagine everything we've seen. The intensity, the focus, the resistance to interruption, and place it all under pressure. Not normal pressure, extreme pressure. Multiple companies, billions of dollars at stake, global expectations, decisions affecting thousands, sometimes millions of people. This is the environment in which Elon Musk operates every day. And under this level of pressure, something begins to happen to the mind. It doesn't slow down. It speeds up. In interviews and public statements over the years, Musk has openly described periods of sleeping very little, working 80 to 100 hours a week, making quick, high-risk decisions. In 2022, during internal reports involving Tesla and SpaceX operations, his work pace was described by colleagues as relentless and often unsustainable. And this is where the dark side begins to emerge. Because a mind capable of hyperfocus can also struggle to switch off. A brain capable of processing information at high speed can also move faster than emotional regulation. And when that happens, decisions become faster, but sometimes more impulsive. Reactions become faster, but sometimes more exposed. And over time, the price begins to show. Fatigue, irritability, mental overload, not always visible, but always accumulating. According to a 2024 analysis published by the Harvard Business Review, leaders operating under prolonged cognitive pressure frequently experience reduced emotional regulation, increased volatility in decisions, and a higher risk of burnout. Not because they are weak, but because the system never shuts down. And this is the part most people never see. The cost of a high-performing mind isn't just output, it's endurance. Because when your brain is always on, rest doesn't come naturally. And over time, that's when the real burnout begins. At first, the intensity seems like strength. The focus seems like discipline. The result seems like success. But over time, something quieter begins to happen. Distancing. Because a constantly engaged mind doesn't always slow down to connect. And when that happens, relationships begin to change. Elon Musk has been described not just as determined, but as distant. Not out of indifference, but because of how his mind works. Highly focused individuals, especially those with intense cognitive patterns, frequently prioritize ideas over interaction. Not consciously, but naturally. And over time, this creates a gap between thinking and feeling, between presence and performance. A 2023 behavioral analysis from Stanford University highlighted that individuals with extremely goal-focused cognition frequently experience reduced social synchronization, emotional detachment during periods of high concentration, difficulty transitioning between task mode and human interaction, not because they don't care, but because their attention is focused elsewhere. And this is where the cost deepens, because while the world sees achievements, the internal experience can be different. Long periods of isolation, moments of disconnection, a constant return to the mind. And when the mind never quiets down, the silence can feel strange, even uncomfortable. This is something that many high-performing individuals in the US have begun to openly acknowledge. A 2024 report from the US Surgeon General identified loneliness and social disconnection as one of the fastest-growing public health concerns, even among those who appear successful, which reveals something deeper. Because the dark side isn't always visible in failure. Sometimes it hides within success, behind productivity, behind recognition, behind constant movement, and slowly it transforms intensity into isolation. At some point, intensity stops feeling like strength and starts feeling like weight. Because a mind that never switches off eventually runs out of space. Not because it becomes weaker, but because it becomes overloaded. This is where burnout begins. Not as a sudden collapse, but as a slow accumulation of mental pressure. In the United States, this is no longer uncommon. A 2025 national survey by the American Institute of Stress found that more than 77% of Americans report experiencing physical symptoms of stress, and nearly 60% say they feel mentally exhausted regularly. This isn't just fatigue, it's cognitive saturation. And for minds already operating at high intensity, the effect becomes amplified, because the system never fully resets. Elon Musk himself described periods of extreme work cycles where rest becomes secondary and production becomes constant. But the human brain was never designed for continuous demand. A 2024 study from Yale School of Medicine showed that prolonged cognitive overload can lead to reduced executive function, impaired clarity in decision-making, increased emotional reactivity, and difficulty maintaining deep focus over time. Which creates a paradox. The very mind that once produced clarity begins to experience fragmentation. And this is where many people in the United States begin to recognize something familiar. Not at Elon Musk's level, but in everyday life. Checking the phone unintentionally. Starting tasks without finishing them. Feeling mentally exhausted even after resting. And wondering quietly, what's happening to my concentration? But perhaps the better question is, how much is my mind trying to process at the same time? Because burnout isn't just about overworking, it's about overprocessing. And the human brain can only carry so much for so long. For years, the conversation has always been the same. Attention problems, difficulty concentrating, and the conclusion almost always points in a single direction: ADHD. But what if that conclusion is incomplete? Because when you observe closely a mind like Elon Musk's, you don't see inattention, you see misalignment. A mind built for depth, placed in a world of interruptions. A brain designed to maintain focus, forced to constantly switch between them. And over time, this friction begins to look like dysfunction. But maybe it's not the mind that has changed. Maybe the environment has changed. Because today, attention is no longer something we protect. It's something we compete for every second. Notifications, short content, constant updates, endless scrolling. Everything is designed, I interrupt. And when a brain, especially one already programmed for intensity, is exposed to continuous interruptions, it doesn't adapt peacefully, it fragments. A 2024 publication from the University of California found that frequent task switching significantly reduces the brain's ability to maintain deep focus over time. Not because attention has disappeared, but because it is being repeatedly redirected. So, what we often interpret as, I can't concentrate anymore, may actually be, I've trained my brain not to stay still in one place. And this is where the narrative changes, because maybe it's not a matter of disorder, maybe it's a matter of exposure. And when you put a mind like Elon Musk's inside a system that constantly fragments attention, the result isn't clarity, it's tension between what the mind is capable of doing and what the environment demands. And that tension is what many people are feeling today. At some point, the question changes. It's no longer what's wrong with my focus. It becomes, what is constantly distracting me from it? Because once you start to see, you can no longer ignore it. the interruptions, the constant switching of focus, the invisible pressure to always be connected. And this is where something important happens: awareness, not as a concept, but as a turning point. Because the moment you recognize that your attention is being conditioned, you realize something else. It can be reconditioned. And this is where people often misinterpret minds like Elon Musk's. They don't succeed because they have more time. They succeed because they protect their attention differently. Not perfectly, but intentionally. And in a world where attention is constantly divided, this becomes a form of control. A 2024 behavioral study from Columbia University showed that individuals who actively reduce digital interruptions experience greater cognitive clarity, greater sustained focus, lower levels of perceived stress, not by doing more, but by removing what fragments them. And that's the change, because control isn't about forcing focus. It's about creating the conditions where focus can exist. Fewer stimuli, more depth, less switching, more presence. And slowly, the mind begins to stabilize. Not instantly, but gradually enough to notice the difference. Because when attention is no longer constantly fragmented, something returns: clarity. And for many people, this clarity seems strange at first, because they haven't experienced it for a long time. And this is where things become more practical. Because awareness is powerful, but by itself, it's not always enough. Because even when you understand what's happening with your attention, your brain is still operating in the same environment, still exposed, still stimulated, still adapting to the constant influx of information. And for many people, this is where the frustration begins. Because they try to concentrate, but their minds don't stay still. Not because they lack discipline, but because their system has been conditioned over time. And when a system is trained, sometimes it needs support to recalibrate. This is something that has been quietly gaining attention in the United States in recent years, not as a trend, but as a response. More people are beginning to observe how cognitive performance is influenced not just by behavior, but by internal balance, neurotransmitters, mental energy, clarity under pressure. And while no solution is instantaneous, some approaches are designed to support what modern environments tend to disrupt. For example, some individuals have begun using cognitive support formulations focused on mental clarity, sustained attention, reduction of mental fatigue, not as a substitute for habits, but as support while those habits are being rebuilt. Resources like Synaptigen have been explored in this context, particularly among individuals who experience high levels of cognitive demand, with the goal of promoting focus stability, mental agility, clarity in decision-making, and, in some cases, additional cognitive support tools like BrainAMP are introduced as part of a broader approach to deal with mental overload. Not as a definitive solution, but as reinforcement. Because when the environment is constantly scattering your attention, support becomes part of the strategy. And gradually, what once seemed scattered begins to stabilize. Perhaps the most disturbing part of all this isn't what's happening to attention. It's the silent way it's been changing. Not in a single instant, but over time, through repetition, through exposure, through patterns that nobody really notices. Until one day, concentration becomes more difficult, silence feels strange, and stillness feels uncomfortable. And that's when the question begins to arise, not aloud, but silently. Has it always been like this? Because when you observe a mind like Elon Musk's, you don't just see difference, you see contrast between depth and distraction, between intensity and interruption. And perhaps this contrast is what makes everything uncomfortable, because it reflects something not about it, but about us, about how we think, how we consume, how we divide our attention without even realizing it. Because the most powerful systems don't force behavior, they mold it, gradually, silently, consistently. And over time, what once required effort becomes automatic. Scrolling, switching, interrupting, until the ability to remain in one place seems almost unnatural. But perhaps this ability was never lost. Perhaps it was just buried under the noise, under the stimulation, under the constant demand. And the moment you start to realize, that's the moment something changes. Not externally, but internally. Because awareness creates distance, and distance creates choice. So maybe the real question was never, is this ADHD? But rather, when did I stop protecting my attention? And maybe that's where it all begins again. Not by forcing control, but by reclaiming it. One moment of focus at a time. If this made you stop, even for a moment, share it with someone who is feeling the same way, or simply leave a comment below. Because sometimes awareness doesn't begin with answers, it begins with a question.